In Driving the Green Book, award-winning broadcaster Alvin Hall takes us on a journey through America's haunted racial past with the legendary Green Book as our guide. Alvin Hall, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Brenda. I'm glad to be here.
Tell us, what is the Green Book?
The Green Book, whose official name is the Negro Motorist Green Book, was created in 1936 by Victor Hugo Green and his wife Alma, who at the time lived in Harlem. Victor was a postman in New Jersey, Hackensack to be specific. During the summer, he and his wife would take trips to go to Richmond, Virginia to visit Alma's relatives. And on their way there, they would encounter aggravations. They could not use bathrooms. They could not buy food. They could not stop at a place to sleep. Victor became frustrated about this and decided to create a publication to help people find the services they wanted when they were traveling. At first, he went among his friends, gathered information, and so the first Green Book really focused on primarily New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, and a little of New England. The next one expanded upon that, and then by 1938, people started to hear about the Green Book, and it gradually started to spread across America. It was published every April or May at the beginning of the summer holiday season so that people could use it when they were on the road.
So the Green Book is named for its founder, Victor Green. How did he take it from that idea to building really like a publishing company in a way, right?
It did become a publishing company. Victor worked as a postman in Hackensack, New Jersey. At the time, there were two postmen's unions, one for white postmen and one for black postmen. Victor was able to tap into people that he knew in both of those unions, and they would tell him about places in cities where they delivered mail that would be appropriate for his travel guide. And that's how he began to source the listings in the travel guide. In the early days, he and Alma would visit the places in order to see what the quality was if they provided services that were appropriate for his publication. Later on, as the Green Book grew and started to cover America, Victor couldn't travel all those places because he was a postman in Hackensack. So he had agents around the country that would gather information for him. Now, the other part of that was distributing the travel guide. Remember, this is still during Jim Crow and segregation in America. So there were newsstands in black communities who could order it in bulk. You could subscribe to it and it would be mailed to you. Pullman porters who worked on trains all around the country who may come to New York City. They would then take it and share it with other Pullman porters who would distribute it around America. And then at one point, marketing stepped in the form of a man who worked for Exxon, then called Esso.
That was the big
big service station owned by Standard Oil. And Esso stations became the first stations to actually carry the Green Book. Not all Esso stations, but those that wanted to and those that were black-owned actually carried it so you could pick it up while you were on the road. There was a man named Billboard Jackson, and he was the marketing person who actually worked for Exxon as a liaison with the Green Book. And so he was the one who helped with that expansion. And there's another little known fact here. Who owned Standard Oil? The Rockefellers. The Rockefellers had been noted abolitionists. Spelman College in Atlanta is named after a Rockefeller. So it seems logical now that the Rockefellers would be much more open to this type of distribution, and they proved this because it was the first oil company in America that allowed black people to actually own the franchises.
One of the things you lay the foundation right away in Driving the Green Book is that in order to understand the Green Book and the importance, you have to understand two major American events that happened beforehand.
And those two major events are the Great Migration and the creation of the automobile. From 1910 to 1970, over 6 million African Americans left the rural South to move north and west to new opportunities. Much of this migration was also prompted by the terrorism that African Americans were experiencing in the South with lynchings, draggings, and drownings. But the other component was the new jobs up north that paid more money than they could ever earn living on a farm. So all of these people from the South, African Americans, moved there for this opportunity. Because they were earning more money, many of them were saving that money. And one of the indications that you had made it was that you were able to buy your own car. It wasn't just a status symbol. It was the thing that enabled you to avoid the frustrations of traveling on public transportations, much of which was segregated. So if you knew that hotel wasn't going to let you stay there, you drove past it. You didn't have to take the bus or the train to sit in the Jim Crow car, which was right behind the engine, to experience the coal, dust, and smoke. You could get in your car and go. And you would buy a big car, a powerful one. Why? Because you couldn't stay at hotels along the way. So if you needed to rest or you were traveling with your children, you wanted someplace where they could rest. That became your domain. And also, there's an important footnote from that period. African Americans found it difficult to buy houses. Although this was post-World War II prosperity, the federal government had policies that discouraged the mixing of the races in housing, and banks redlined areas where they would not make loans, and these areas were largely black communities. So for many black people, the thing that you could buy yourself, the thing that you could own and take your pride in, was your car.
Tell me about the businesses that populated the Green Book and that made these journeys possible and enjoyable too.
In every town and city across America, there was an area that was locally referred to as a Little Harlem. Walnut Street in Louisville, Kentucky, Jefferson Street in Nashville, the Avenue, Jefferson Davis Avenue in Mobile, Alabama, Farish Street in Jackson, Mississippi. This is where the entrepreneurs built pharmacies, record stores. There were doctor's offices, law offices, eateries, restaurants, nightclubs. Whatever Black Americans imagined, they saved their money, often from working factory jobs, in order to open these places. And they showed what they could do on a shoestring. That old statement, making a way out of no way, is personified in the entrepreneurial efforts that came out of this. These were places of Black excellence. They were also the economic energies of many of these towns. People wanted those services. African American entrepreneurs provided them.
And the Green Book also changed America in a much broader sense because it contained crucial information on the laws regarding discrimination and segregation.
It was called Know Your Rights, and it was a state-by-state listings of the rights in those states after the passage of the Civil Rights Act. Not surprising, not all the states were listed because many states continued to ignore the law in their day-to-day practices. But Victor made Black people aware of what was available to them.
Sharing this information created the next breakthrough.
Sharing the information saved lives, but it also made the next generation aware of the promises that had been made that had not been fulfilled. And it empowered them to say, why don't we have these rights? Why are we still fighting this? Why should I still be in this subservient role? So it provided the momentum that became part of the civil rights movement.
So as the Green Book itself was sort of fading out, a new movement took place.
Victor always wanted there to be a time when the Green Book would no longer be necessary. In fact, he wrote about that in the book. And he said that he would publish this until the laws changed and opportunities existed equally for black people in America. As the civil rights movement was building, Victor covered it in certain parts, talking about the various breakthroughs that different organizations had brought to civil rights. So I would say that it was more desegregation that killed off the Green Book. The civil rights movement continued, but the need for separate accommodations was diminished.
It must have been so cool to just peel away the layers as you took this journey.
Brenda, what you say is so true. It's not just peeling back the story of the Green Book. It's when I'm out talking to people about it, gathering the personal stories, hearing their memories of that time, families who recall using the Green Book. One of my favorite stories was told to me by Hezekiah Jackson in Birmingham, Alabama. He would say he would be at home and his mother would be all at church and somebody would come and knock on the door and said, can we borrow that Green Book? And he said, well, when Mama comes back home, and they kept it in a part of the house, and people would come over where they were taking trips to visit relatives in New York or Detroit, and they would want that Green Book because, as he said about his family, when we travel, my granddaddy had the Green Book and he had his pocket Bible.
It was that important.
It was that important.